In this episode, two-tone mags on a 1903? Who knew? Dirty, gone. Time to go do some conservation work. Some fun was had while we were waiting for that conservation. Spooky stuff, kids. Hard to tell, but is it a 1911 or is it a 1903? The lineage is obvious. Description of events. 9 pounds of kit in a 2-pound box. Well, got to put it back together again sooner or later. More reassembly. Remember, polished hammer faces are the rule of the day. Viola. It must come apart somehow. If brute force isn't working, use more of it. Getting this gun apart isn't going to be the tough part. Putting it back together again is. Let's get on down the rabbit hole here because I think you'll find this one kind of interesting. Two-tone mag. Check that noise out. In case you guys were wondering, there is a different way to put a blue color on something, and that's dipping it in the hot salts. You can stop it at any color you want. So like when they dipped a Luger trigger, they stopped at yellow. These things, they held on to them like this and dipped them in the salts like that and came back up. Now why they didn't do the top is they didn't want to draw the temper on the springs here on the feed lips. So if you're ever wondering, two-tone 1911 mags, two-tone, this, I'm going to honestly tell you, it's the first two-tone mag I have ever seen for a 1903. So there's an arrow up here right on the nose of the slide. And you bring it out to that arrow and you rotate the barrel. And the barrel will come out and the slide will come off the top here. Take that spring out and we'll pop the barrel out here. Let's see, we'll find the right orientation. So this thing's pretty scroted up on the inside. Major patches of the finish are missing on the outside. Yeah, it is what it is. So what we've done is when we go to disassemble it, we're just rolling this up and then that tooth portion right there disengages and then that allows us to bring right everything off the front of the frame. So that's pretty decent. Let me get the mag out of the way. We're just breaking this thing down real quick. I'm not going to dwell on taking this gun apart so much as I'm going to show you how it goes back together again. Because I seem to remember this style of gun being a major pain in the ass to put together. Abracadabra! Poof, here it is. Okay, so we took it apart, and I got to say, I had to learn how to take it apart. But we will be looking a lot deeper at how this thing goes back together again, and that's going to be more important. So I've stripped the mag, taken the follower out so we can clean that. We got the original, they look like gutta-percha grips on this thing. They're awesome. Barrel, recoil spring. I didn't take the firing pin out because it didn't occur to me to do that before we went live on this take. Trigger. Then you have a disconnector, a sear, a safety, a grip safety. The thumb safety interacts with the sear, and we're going to show that to you in an uptight later on because we want you to know how this thing works. And then a 3-finger, and you know what's really odd? This is a 1905, and yet it's beginning to look strangely like a 1911. Ooh, spooky stuff, eh, kids? Bruno, did you happen to catch a good look at that? All right, I did a conservation on this thing, and all I did was clean all the gack off of it and punch the surface up a little bit. It's no big deal. It just, the gun's only new once. I've covered that before. But what I really wanted to show when we had this 1903 here is where the lineage went, where it went. So here's the disconnector on a 1911. And here's the disconnector on a 1903. So it's pretty close that John Browning had already figured this out. All right. The sear on a 1911 is right here. So there's the sear and it pivots back and forth and it comes into the hammer and it grabs the hammer notch. The sear on the 1903 is right here. And then those sear noses grab right there. So it's the same setup between 1911, 1903. Now the grip safety is a little bit different. The grip safety on this 1903 is this way. So when you, here, hang on a second here. When the grip safety is in the safe mode, that's stacked like that. And then when you step on it with your palm, it pops underneath and allows the sear freedom to move. On a 1911, the grip safety, this surface right here will pivot down and prevent the trigger shoe from coming backwards. So it's a little bit different. He designed a few things differently there. But he was still, he had already figured out the 3-finger spring arrangement, where in this case, both of these are grip safety and the one in the middle is the disconnector. In this one, it goes trigger, disconnector, and grip safety. So slightly different, but you can see the lineage here. We've already got the frame. I'm not a historian here, but we've got the slide that slides on the grooves in the frame. We've got the slide that slides on the grooves in the frame. And all 3 of these weapons have one thing in common. When you've exhausted your ammunition supply, you just conk the guy on the head. The gun's out of the pot now, and I use just a slight amount of chemicals on it in order to just kind of make it look less heinous and knock it down 1 notch. I'm not going in here and polishing this. This gun was only new once. It's one of the ones that had been in the fire. If we want to polish it later, we'll do it. I'm not that good at it, but I've got it set up here on this lead block. I want to talk about some of what's going on in here and what overlays and what underlays and why things are the way they are. So right now, I've got 2 punches pushed up through the bottom of this thing, and I've got the sear laid on top of the hammer. And when the hammer is at full cock, there you go. And it's actually that simple. When you take the trigger guard bow and you push backwards on this, let's get that lined up the right way. The trigger, I'm sorry, the trigger is sitting in there and it's got a hollow bow. And the reason why it's hollow is like on a 1911, the magazine has to be able to feed up through it like that. So when you push back on a trigger, it's going to shove the sear around and is going to allow the hammer to fall, hitting the firing pin, and off we go. So that's 1 layer right there, but there are more layers. There are 2 things that happen in this mess to keep you from squeezing the trigger. And the first one is this grip safety that sits in here, and we're going to have to put the hammer in the middle of it. So when we're in this configuration right here, and we have not pushed down on the grip safety, these 2 surfaces right here are contacting each other, preventing the sear from rotating. When you push in on the grip safety, that will override like that and allow the sear to clear and allow the hammer to come down and hit the primer. So that's 1 layer. And we got to fight all of this in order to put this back together again. All right, so we're going to rebuild another layer here. This is the disconnector that slides up and down, and the slide moves that. And the disconnector is going to bear up against the bottom of the sear right there to rotate the sear. So all that sits down over this pin. And remember, we got to hold all of this in alignment while we're trying to drive all these pins in with the mainspring trying to fight us. So that sits there like that. Yeah. Then in order to keep all this moving, we've got this spring, and the center leaf of this spring right there is going to bear on the bottom of this disconnector, and it's going to cause it to be pushed up. The disconnector rides up and down inside of this dimple right here. So when the slide breaks to the rear, this is pushed down in that format. You see, when that goes to the rear, it's pushed down. And the only way it's allowed to be up is when the slide's in battery. Then this will come up, and it will allow the trigger to push backwards on this, rotate the sear out of the way, and have the hammer drop. There's one more thing that's got to happen in this whole mess, and that's the thumb safety. So the thumb safety has a projection sticking out of it right there, that little hook. And that little hook is going to hook the inside of this sear, and I don't really know how to show it to you this way. Let's try doing it like this. Bruno's got some skills, no? Yeah, that's cool. So let me get set up and we'll figure out how to bang this whole thing back together again, because this is like walking, chewing gum on greased marbles and teaching a pig how to fly, none of which works and usually results in a pissed off pig. Trigger bow. Trigger bow has to go in first. When you have the trigger bow in, verify that the mag can slide freely and verify that the trigger bow can slide, because that's going to save you just a lot of grief later. Sear, disconnector have got to line up over that hole right there, while the top of the disconnector shows up through this hole while I bump the camera with my head. So that's got to go in there. That's got to sit down there, and then you got to be able to get an alignment pin shoved through all of this so that it'll take it. There it is. So now I've got an alignment pin stuck through that stack. I've got the disconnector sticking up through its disconnection hole here, and we've got the sear right there. There's the top of the sear right there, rotating around on this shaft. And now we're going to capture that with its pin. Just going to capture that with its pin here. We're going to chase this through. Got to find it there. I think my assembly pin isn't quite large enough. Okay, so now I've got all that chased in and captured, and yes, I've got everything kind of upside down, but trust me, this is all going to work out in the future. Okay, a bunch of stuff moved on the bench because we had to answer the doorbell of all things. Okay, this is the magazine holder right there, and it slides into a rectangular slot. I don't know if I've already mentioned this or not, but there's a rectangular slot right there. There it is. You can see the blue through it. And that little protrusion there goes in there, and that keeps it from moving up and down. Now, this 3-wing spring here is going to ride in. There's a set of slots cut in the side of this thing. One right there and one right there. You can see those slots. This goes in the lower of the 2 slots, and then that little part right there that you see, that line across there, is going to be the bottom of this spring. You'll see what I'm talking about. Okay, let me get my pliers here. I'm going to set that bad boy right in there like that. Get that to go down. Now the back end of this spring, I got to get the nose up. There it is. That sits in there. Of course, I knocked that out, right? Because, well, I'm having a low dexterity day here. There we go. This gun's been run a lot, and it's been taken apart a lot. Okay, so the back of this spring is actually what's pushing down and giving this the resistance to pop in and out on the mag. Okay, so that spring's doing 3 things. 2 of them are pushing down on the sear. One of them is pushing on the disconnector, and then the back end of it is pushing on the mag release. Okay, now this honking thing has got to go in. You see the wings here. It's going in on the forward set of wings. And you see that the shining spot on that spring right there is corresponding to the leading edge of this. So this walks in, sits down in that, and this whole hateful pile of crap is going to have to get compressed in by this. So let me take this out and show you something. We've got the sear, let me get it lit right. We've got the sear hooks rotated around so that this can hook in on top of that and come in that way. Okay. Well, we got to do that with this honking thing sitting in the middle of it, and it makes it a little bit difficult. We got a lot of stuff we got to compress here. This has to ride up over those notches And then it sits down in this notch right here. Resist the temptation to try to get it go up in there. It goes right there. Right there. And then that whole thing gets rotated around. And I'm going to run, here it is, this is the pin I'm looking for. I'm just going to run a punch through that to hang on to that. Now right now you've got a lot of spring force here because the mainspring, that little silver thing is riding up against the inside of this grip safety, but that's not entirely a bad thing. So let me go ahead and capture this. I'm just going to go ahead and run the main pin down in it. And I mean, there's a lot of force here. I am really squeezing on this pig. Okay, there we go. So now we got it all trapped together. We're going to verify that this works while we're still at this point. It should grab a mag, although we got the sear in the way and we got to get that out of the way up there, yeah. Make sure all that's free to move. Okay, good. Now this thing is quite the brute. But that quite the brute's going to work in our favor. And here's the part about putting a 1903 together I don't know if a lot of people know. The hammer hooks are in the front here. And then there's a roller. And as you cock this thing, the mainspring sits here and it provides a force to rotate it that way. So if you can see the shiny part of the spring right there, parallel with my fingernail, that line right there. We're going to drop this down so that this knot sits on top of it. And once we set that mainspring notch in there, let me see if I can get the light to shine through the blue hole so you can see it. Where's the camera lens? Right there. There's a sliver of blue light right there. You can just see it. And as you squeeze on a grip safety, that turns into a half moon, and that's the trick. You set that pin in there, squeeze the hell out of that, and that ought to just pop right through. And it is. There it goes. So that's the trick to fighting this mainspring. Now, in order to get the safety the rest of the way in the hole, you line it up and you got to cock the hammer and it'll go in and then kick back down. So now we're going to check. Safety's up, we got nothing. Safety's down, no grip safety, we got nothing. Grip safety down, and we're able to drop the hammer. So it passes those safety checks right there. Yeah, that's a lot of fun. So the trick to remember is squeezing the grip safety is the key. Once you get this depressed and you got everything lined up, it should drop right in. There, I don't recommend taking a 1903 apart unless you've got a fully equipped bench. Now, with the sear out of the way, we can verify that this locks and drops clear. And it does, and nothing is affected. That's good. That's something we want to know. Grips, nice. Colt, got a Percha. These things look beautiful. Somebody has succeeded in not screwing these up. That panel drops there. That panel drops there. And then that spring's going to go through this escutcheon and get run home. And that will grab, and I can feel it coming up underneath my other finger. Ha 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 ha. Alright, screw that. Let's get over to something more interesting here, the slide. I pre-started this pin just because it's a pain in the neck. This spring has got an open end on it, which tells me that it's a replacement spring because the original probably went flying across the room sometime in the last 20 years. So put the open end of the spring down inside the tunnel so that the closed end, the end that's been manufactured, is laying up against the bottom here of the extractor right there. And just shove that down in the hole, shove it to the rear, and it should take it. Now what we really got to make sure we don't do is shove this thing through so far that it blocks this hole here. And we're a little bit too far to the rear. I can actually see that. I got to get a punch down in there. There's a slight overlap. There's like two holes there. And what you'll see is that people will beat on these things. Here we go. Now, I don't know if this is a feature or not. I don't know if this does this on this particular gun, but a lot of these guns are set up so that when this thing is snapped over an extractor, when the extractor snapped over the rim of a cartridge, This will stick out and give you kind of a tactile feel whether or not there's a round in there or not. I don't have a dummy 380 round, and we're not gonna go there. So let me get this thing oiled down. Again, after I do conservations, this is just lawnmower oil or used motor oil. It doesn't have any detergent in it. Just for the first time you oil it. You spend all this time trying to put this, punch this finish back up. You don't want to just arbitrarily mess the finish up. Okay, the way Browning did this firing pin train, he did it in two pieces. And there's a spring on the forward piece, and then this is the piece then that hits the back end of that. So, well, which way does it go? This way or that way? Well, there's the pinhole right there. That's going to hang on to that notch right there. And then this is the cross pin, and I've prepared this cross pin with a slight. I've kind of knocked the edge off of it so that it's easier to drive through. And in this particular case, we'll come in from this side, and we'll just start driving that in just a little bit to hang on to it. Spring goes in first, forward firing spring. And a little bit of trouble getting this thing apart because there was some yak down inside this hole. So I'm hoping that this doesn't fight us going together. That slides in there like that. You can see it is indeed spring loaded. It'll kick it loose. Now, we're looking at this thing axially, and we can see the firing pin tunnel, and we now know that the pin comes under the tunnel, so the notch is going to wind up facing down. And we'll just grab this here with a pair of pliers. We'll insert this inside the hole, and then we got to kick this in. Now it is spring loaded, so we're going to have to get that all to go in there. And this may require a little bit of maneuvering here. Okay, we'll get that shoved up in there, and then I'm going to take an assembly pin and I'm going to wind that up inside that hole and exercise this until that snaps in. You see that punch move? And then when that punch moves, now I can drive that punch out backwards. I can just take a little bit of force here, hang on to this, and drive it through this way. Verify that this is free to move again, and by that time I can just take that out and drive this sucker home. 2-ounce ball peen, polished face. So I'm not swinging this hammer, I'm just kind of tapping on it. So it looks like I'm beating on this thing, but I'm just love tapping it. Okay, we're flush there, we're flush here. We verify at the end of all this tapping that this is free to move, and that we get protrusion out the end of the firing pin face. You can see that there sticking out. Now, on some of these John Browning designs, it is possible to put this firing pin train together. Let's say you put this together with that pin forcing this to stay protruded. Well, then it won't feed a cartridge. Believe me, somebody will put a live round in there, drop the slide on this thing, and be quite surprised when it fires out of battery. So just verify that everything's free to move and that it's spring loaded, and then you're there. Now in this particular case then, on the front of this, that's just going to slide in like that. Okay, and then there's a recess in here, right there. So those teeth drop into that recess. They go in there. I had to feel for that, and that's going to roll 90 like this. So when you're all done, that's going to line up that way. So we run it sideways, and then we can just put it on the frame here. You've got a tunnel. You've got a tunnel here, and the plunger goes down inside of the tunnel so that the spring is guided. So it doesn't want to kink. It doesn't want to do this, because then the rest of it's going to go inside the tunnel there. Slide on. Slide that up inside. Right? And now we're going to get back to that arrow we were talking about. I'm going to see if I can get you. There it is right there. It's sticking out like a sore thumb. There's an arrow right there. You see it? That's an arrow and a line. And what that's telling you is that when that line lines up with the front of the slide, you're in the correct position in order to be able to put it the rest of the way back together again. Here we go. I'll just kick the safety on in order to hang on to the slide. And that bar isn't quite lined up yet, so the barrel can't quite rotate enough. You pull this back just a little bit further and wiggle it, and you'll feel the barrel come around 90 degrees like this. You see that come around, and then that will line the notch up right here in the barrel. And then once that happens, we take it off, and now it's trapped. And you have a completely assembled 1903 pocket automatic. Magazine, the part of the mag spring that holds the nose of the cartridge follower up. You want that to hold that up so that it's trying to rotate everything up. Insert the spring. I've already gone ahead and done all my oiling on the inside here. So you insert the spring down in here, and then the way I do this, so I shove a file down in here like this. Put that in. This is the hateful part of this. I shove that spring down in there like that, and then trap the spring with a pin. And now that's going to allow you to work this problem relatively unmolested. That's just going to rotate down in there like that, and then don't let the spring snap back up, because it'll mess up these lips. Just give it something to fight against. Pop that out and bang, there you go. And now you've got the mag put back together again. And I think we're pretty much there, and we've saved another one from the fire. We've done all of the disconnector checks on this particular gun. We put 2 rounds in the mag and made sure that it wasn't going to maxim on us. Maximing is when a handgun goes full auto, and we really don't want that to happen. Even on guns that are supposed to be full auto handguns, you really don't want to do that. I've noticed something about the grip angle on these guns. I think they're designed to be fired low like this, and it's throwing brass like crazy, and it's running great. Now I got to tell you what, I'm empty, and this has been awesome. Let's get back inside, shall we? Colt 1903 pocket hammerless, another one of those saves that was done out of the fire. A beautiful piece of kit. I tell you, John Browning was years ahead of his time. As always, it's been a pleasure to get on down the rabbit hole with you guys, and I'm looking forward to doing it again.